The reason I was off is because everybody sucked. There was nobody to fight.
We'll kill everybody. I'll stay here. It's my home. Allahu Akbar! Woo!
Nate Diaz! Khamzat Chimaev!
Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev, the ultimate fight breakdown. Now, one of the biggest stars in the UFC could potentially face the most hyped prospect since Conor McGregor. That's right, we could be getting Nate Diaz against Khamzat Chimaev. The matchup was first discussed when the board with potential fights was leaked a few weeks ago, and we could clearly see Diaz versus Chimaev on the board. It is Nate's last fight on his UFC contract, and there have been rumors about him wanting to test the free agent market, so the UFC is trying to give him a tough matchup for the last bout. This is definitely a matchup to look forward to, so without further ado, we here at Athlete Central are here to tell you everything you need to know about it in this ultimate fight breakdown.
Nate Diaz! Nate Diaz has done it!
Recent fights. Let's start off with Khamzat, who on his UFC debut stepped in on short notice against Welsh striker John Phillips at middleweight, replacing Dusko Todorovic. The bookmakers saw the potential in the Chechnyan and put him as a -500 favorite. But even the hardcore fans did not know of Khamzat's skill back then. They certainly did after this fight though. Chimaev dominated every second, securing a Darce choke in the second round and only absorbing one strike in the 6 minutes of action. His next fight came in just 10 days, and it was an even more impressive performance. Chimaev took his opponent Rhys McKee down and dominated him for 3 minutes, landing 40 strikes and absorbing none before the referee decided to step in and put an end to McKee's misery. Khamzat broke the record for the quickest turnaround time for victories in UFC history with this performance. He then had a step up in competition, facing Gerald Meerschaert at middleweight. People thought this would be a harder matchup for Chimaev given Gerald's grappling prowess, but Khamzat shocked the world by knocking the veteran out in just 17 seconds. Putting a real stamp on his name in the UFC, it was true, Khamzat was the real deal. After multiple fights that fell through against Leon Edwards because of COVID, Chimaev returned to the octagon at UFC 267, facing his first ranked opponent at 170 pounds, Jingliang Li. That fight was yet another utter domination, as Khamzat effortlessly picked Li up and cradled him to the side of the octagon, talking to Dana White in the process.
Oh my goodness! He's talking to Dana!
Chimaev then absolutely battered Li before securing a rear naked choke finish. His latest fight was against Brazilian Gilbert Burns, and by far his biggest tenth since Dorino was ranked number 2 at welterweight at the time. The fight was extremely back and forth. Chimaev faced the most resistance he ever had and for once was not getting his way with his opponent. Khamzat did get the first round, but after Gilbert's resurgence in the second, there was everything to fight for in that last round. Chimaev ultimately ended up getting the unanimous decision victory, but it was no easy feat. If you want to see a more detailed analysis of this fight, check out our video on why Khamzat is the real deal with the link below. Now moving on to Nate Diaz, the Stockton gangster. He's only had 5 fights in the last 6 years, and the first 2 were against the biggest star in the sport, Conor McGregor. We'll analyze the bout at UFC 196 first, when Diaz stepped in on short notice to replace Rafael dos Anjos. Conor expended a lot of energy in the first round trying to finish Nate with powerful shots, but ultimately failing. Nate's chin held up well, and he is notorious for being very durable, so the second round was no easy feat for Conor. Diaz rocked Conor a few times at the beginning of the second round because the Irishman was very fatigued, and ended up attempting a takedown, which led to the BJJ black belt Diaz securing a rear naked choke and having a legendary post-fight interview.
All of a sudden he's shooting for a takedown, and I'm like, oh, you're a wrestler now. You're a wrestler. I remember I'm the black belt in jiu-jitsu, and you're shooting on me now, so me and you know that this is a wrap. This is a wrap.
The rematch took place 5 months later at UFC 202, being the second highest ever pay-per-view for the UFC, only behind Khabib versus Conor. The fight then went the distance this time, with Conor winning rounds 1, 2, and 4, and Diaz taking 2 and 5 in a closely contested fight. Conor scored 3 knockdowns though, so the fans calling it a robbery should seriously reconsider watching that one back. Nate took a 3-year hiatus from the sport after the loss and came back in 2019 to face Anthony Showtime Pettis at UFC 241. The fight was an utter domination and Diaz outclassed him, securing a unanimous decision victory and landing almost double the strikes that Pettis did. The star had officially returned and he planned on staying active. Only 2.5 months later, Diaz returned to the octagon to headline UFC 244 against Jorge Masvidal for the BMF belt that the UFC made just for this fight. Jorge was completely dominating Nate in the fight, outstriking him in every round and showing immaculate technique, managing to drop Diaz twice in 3 rounds and even landing a takedown. The ending of the fight was a bit anticlimactic though, since the doctor stopped it because of a cut on Nate's face, giving Masvidal the victory and crowning him as the BMF champ. 2 years later, in his most recent fight, Nate faced Leon Edwards in a 5-round non-title bout made especially for Nate. Edwards was dominating the fight for 24 minutes before Nate managed to rock him in the final minute of the fight. The fans love Nate because of his raw personality and also the antics inside the cage. But this time, it let the Stockton gangster down. Instead of chasing a finish in a fight that he was clearly losing, Nate chose to taunt Edwards and point at him, giving Rocky the unanimous decision win. Attributes. Chimaev is heading into the prime of his career. He is 28 and has a bright future ahead of him. Diaz is 37 on the other hand and is probably only going to have a handful of fights before retiring. So let's hope one of them will be the McGregor trilogy. Chimaev is the taller man, standing at 6 feet 2 inches compared to Diaz, who is 6 foot. Nate has a small 1-inch reach advantage, being at 76 inches compared to Khamzat's 75. Striking. Before getting into the stats, we want to say that Nate has 3 times the amount of fights that Khamzat does, so the sample size for Chimaev is very small. But let's head into the striking. Chimaev lands a lot more strikes than Diaz, up at 7.89 significant strikes per minute compared to 4.51 for Diaz. Nate also has a lower accuracy, down at 45% compared to Chimaev's 59%. Nate's defense is a lot better though. Despite only absorbing 1 significant strike across his first fights in the UFC, Khamzat absorbed a whopping 119 against Burns, leaving his significant strikes absorbed per minute at 4.30, which is significantly higher than Nate's 3.73. Diaz also has better striking defense, defending 52% of his opponent's strikes, while Chimaev only defends 41%. In terms of power, the advantage is definitely with Chimaev. He has 6 knockouts over 11 fights, while Diaz only has 4 KOs or TKOs across 33 fights. So it is safe to say that Nate doesn't pack a lot of power. Grappling. When it comes to grappling in the wrestling department, there is no question as to who is superior. Chimaev lands triple the amount of takedowns that Nate does. He lands 3.23 per 15 minutes, and Nate Diaz is down at 1.10. Chimaev's accuracy is also way better. He has a 66% completion rate compared to Nate's 30%. In terms of takedown defense, Diaz is not great. He has a 41% defense rate. Chimaev, on the other hand, has defended all of the takedowns that have been attempted at him. So now let's move on to submissions, somewhere both fighters truly excel. Chimaev attempts 2.7 subs per 15 minutes, while Nate attempts 1.3. However, they are both proficient at completing those submissions. Chimaev has secured 4 subs, while Nate has 12 on his official record, with 3 more from the Ultimate Fighter. Chimaev likes using the rear naked choke and the Darce choke, while Nate's go-tos are the triangle choke, the guillotine choke, and the rear naked choke. Prediction? So this fight is a bit of a mismatch given the dominance of Chimaev and Nate's tendency to struggle with wrestlers. Fighters like Rory McDonald and Benson Henderson absolutely dominated Nate on the ground, and even Edwards, who isn't a traditional wrestler, landed 4 takedowns on Diaz in his last fight. The most likely outcome in this fight is a wrestling masterclass from Chimaev. He has shown that when he takes you down, he can keep you down, and we don't imagine that it will be any different against Diaz. One thing that Khamzat does have to be worried about though is Nate's jiu-jitsu. Diaz is incredible off of his back, and anyone that goes to the ground with him definitely has to worry about the submission game. One thing that plays in Nate's favor is his durability. Chimaev looked exhausted in the fight against Burns and was also hesitant to engage in the grappling after the Brazilian submission attempts. If Nate can overcome the early pressure of Khamzat, he can utilize his boxing in the later rounds to get an advantage and potentially secure a submission if the fight ends up on the ground. However, we imagine that Chimaev's team would work on pacing the fight if it were to be 5 rounds for Khamzat to last longer and keep his pressure in the later rounds, because skill-wise, he clearly has the advantage over Nate. It is just a matter of cardio, pacing, and good submission defense. Chimaev is a massive negative 550 favorite for this fight, with Diaz being a big plus 425 underdog. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Who would you put your money on? Drop your fight predictions in the comments below and make sure to like and subscribe to never miss an Athlete Central video. Until next time.